The weight of 6 executive stares pressed down on me across the glass table. Their expressions ranged from thinly veiled anger to cold calculation. The conference room on the 32nd floor felt airless despite its size. "The evidence speaks for itself, Miss Rivera," said the man at the head of the table, leaning forward. His silver tie clip caught the light. "Your negligence caused a 12-day production halt. That's $7 million in losses." I clutched my portfolio tighter. "That's not what happened. I completed every safety test required." "Then explain this," interrupted a woman to my right, sliding a document across the polished surface. It was my inspection report, but altered. 3 critical stress tests. Tests I distinctly remembered performing were marked incomplete. "This has been changed," I said, my voice barely audible. The chief legal officer, a man with sharp eyes and sharper words, raised an eyebrow. "Are you accusing someone in this company of falsifying safety documentation? That's a serious allegation." My throat tightened. 6 of the most powerful people in the organization stared at me with expressions that made clear I was alone in this battle. The chief manufacturing officer cleared his throat, his gold watch glinting as he adjusted his sleeve. "The facts are straightforward," he said. "A valve malfunctioned because proper safety protocols weren't followed. Production stopped. Millions lost. The inspection record shows your signature, with incomplete tests." I opened my mouth to protest again, but the CEO raised his hand. "We're not here to debate what happened. We're here to resolve this situation." His voice had the practiced evenness of someone who had fired hundreds before me. "We have 2 options for you, Dara." The use of my first name felt like a threat. The chief legal officer slid another document toward me. "Option 1. Sign this statement acknowledging you rushed certification and bypassed required tests. We handle this internally. You transition to a non-safety role at another facility. At reduced compensation," added the CFO, as if clarifying a minor detail. "And option 2? I asked, already knowing the answer. "We pursue negligence charges," said the CEO simply. "Your inspection license would be revoked. Your professional reputation, well, the threat hung between us. I thought about my mortgage payments, about my father's mounting nursing home bills, about the 15 years I'd spent building my career. If I sign, what happens to the production line? The other valves? "We'll address any technical issues," said the manufacturing officer, his eyes sliding away from mine. That's when I understood. They needed a scapegoat for the financial loss. Once I took responsibility, they could continue operations without the expensive valve replacements that safety would demand. More valves would fail. Next time, people could be injured. Or worse, "Admit you made the error or will involve the authorities," the CEO warned, his patience visibly thinning. He pushed the document toward me. "Sign it, and we can all move forward." My hands shook as I picked up the pen they'd provided. I felt like I was watching myself from above as I reviewed their carefully crafted confession. With deliberate slowness, I bent over the page. Just before my signature, I carefully added 1 additional sentence. In the tense silence, no one noticed my addition before the CEO whisked the paper away, his smile tight with satisfaction. "A wise decision," he said, placing the document in his portfolio without reading it. "HR will contact you about your transition tomorrow." I was dismissed without ceremony. As the elevator descended, my legs nearly gave out beneath me. What had I just done? Hey, wait before I continue. If you're enjoying this workplace revenge story, give it a like so I know to share more like it. Hit that subscribe button if you want to hear more stories about people who refuse to be stepped on in the corporate world. I promise the justice in this one is worth sticking around for. Drop a comment about a time you've been blamed for something that wasn't your fault. We've all been there. My name is Dara Rivera, and until last week, I was the head safety inspector at one of the country's largest manufacturing plants. I'd spent 7 years in the role, building a reputation for thoroughness that annoyed some managers, but earned respect from the workers whose lives depended on my sign-offs. Let me back up to where the trouble really began. 3 months ago, the company invested in a new production line, their most expensive expansion in a decade. The pressure was immense to get it operational quickly. The moment I saw the blueprints for the pressure valve system, I raised concerns. "These aren't rated for the temperatures we'll be running," I told my supervisor, Penn. Penn sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Dara, please don't start this again. The project is already behind schedule." "Again? This is the first time I've seen these specs." "You know what I mean. Your inspections are delaying production timelines. Executives are watching the numbers closely." I stood my ground. "I need to run additional stress tests before clearing this system." That afternoon, the project director, Valerie, called me into her office. I'd always respected her pragmatism, even when we disagreed. "Penn tells me you're concerned about the valve system," she said, motioning for me to sit. I showed her my calculations. "The safety margin is too narrow. Under sustained pressure, these valves could fail." Valerie studied my notes, her expression serious. "What would make you comfortable signing off?" "I need to run 3 additional stress tests: temperature cycling, pressure surge resistance, and long-duration performance." She nodded slowly. "I can delay 2 weeks, but not more. And I need you to personally verify the final safety clearance. Your signature, your responsibility." "Agreed," I said, relieved she was taking my concerns seriously. The tests proceeded under my supervision. Each valve was subjected to conditions exceeding normal operational parameters. I documented everything meticulously: photographs, measurements, performance graphs. When all 3 tests showed acceptable results, I signed the final safety clearance. 2 months after launch, it happened. At 2:17 a.m. during 3rd shift, a pressure valve malfunctioned. The emergency systems engaged as designed, preventing injuries, but production stopped completely. Initial estimates suggested repairs would take at least 12 days, costing millions in lost production. I was called in immediately. Working alongside the company's investigative team, I explained my initial concerns and the additional testing we'd performed. "Your vigilance probably prevented injuries," the lead investigator, a woman named Trish, told me privately as we examined the failed valve. "This could have been much worse if the emergency systems weren't properly calibrated." I felt a momentary relief. Then my phone rang. It was Penn. "Headquarters wants you in the executive conference room tomorrow morning, 9 sharp." His tone told me everything I needed to know. That night, I barely slept. I reviewed all my documentation, saved copies to multiple devices, and emailed key files to my personal account. Something told me I needed to prepare for the worst. When I walked into that conference room the next morning, 6 executives waited: the CEO, CFO, COO, Chief Manufacturing Officer, Head of Risk Management, and Chief Legal Officer. No allies, no witnesses. And that's how I found myself signing a confession for something I didn't do. 2 days later, my phone rang as I was boxing up family photos from my desk. The caller ID showed the Chief Legal Officer's direct line. "What does this mean?" she demanded, her voice tight with controlled fury. "Which part?" I asked, though I knew exactly what she meant. "The line you added before your signature. This statement acknowledges that identical pressure valves remain installed on lines 2 through 7, with the same defects and certification process described herein." My heart pounded, but I kept my voice steady. "It means exactly what it says. If you're accepting my confession as true, then you're also accepting my statement that 6 other production lines have the same defective valves installed under the same certification process you claim was negligent." The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought she'd hung up. "The board has called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning," she finally said. "Your presence is required." 8 a.m. I spent another sleepless night, but this time with a different kind of anxiety. I'd thrown a wrench into their neat solution. Either they would double down on destroying me, or the boardroom was different from the executive conference room, larger, with a horseshoe table where 15 board members sat. None of the 6 executives who had confronted me were present. The board chairman, a woman with steel gray hair and piercing eyes, called the meeting to order. "Ms. Rivera, we've reviewed your amended statement." An independent safety inspector was called in overnight to evaluate the pressure valve systems on all production lines. I sat very still, waiting. "All 7 production lines have been shut down pending a comprehensive safety review," she continued. "Initial findings suggest the valves on lines 2 through 7 do indeed share design similarities with the one that failed." Murmurs rippled around the table. The chairman raised her hand for silence. "We need to understand exactly what happened, both with the valves and with this document you were asked to sign." For the next hour, I explained everything: my initial concerns, the additional testing, the altered documentation, and the ultimatum I'd been given. Several board members took notes. Others asked pointed questions that suggested they were hearing about these issues for the first time. "One final question, Miss Rivera," said the chairman. "Why did you sign the document at all if you knew it was false?" I met her gaze directly, because adding that sentence transformed it from a personal confession into a company-wide safety admission. If they accepted my statement as true, they became legally obligated to shut down 6 additional production lines. If they rejected it, they'd have to explain why they'd forced me to sign a false confession in the first place. The chairman's expression remained neutral, but several board members exchanged glances. "Thank you for your candor," she said. "We'll need time to deliberate. You'll be contacted this afternoon with our decision." As I gathered my things to leave, I wondered if I'd just committed career suicide. Had my one defiant sentence been enough? Or had I simply given them a more complete case against me? The afternoon crawled by with excruciating slowness. I sat in the company cafeteria, unable to return to my office, but unwilling to leave the building. My phone remained silent as I nursed a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Employees I'd known for years avoided my gaze, whispering as they passed my table. News traveled fast. At 4:37 p.m., a text message arrived. "Chairman's office. Now." The walk to the executive floor felt like marching to my own professional execution. My career, my reputation, my financial security, everything hung in balance because of one sentence I'd added to a document. A sentence that might have saved lives, but could also end everything I'd worked for. The chairman's assistant ushered me in without a word. Inside, the chairman sat alone, a stack of documents in front of her. "Please sit, Miss Rivera." I lowered myself into the chair opposite her desk, my back rigid. "The board has reached several decisions today," she began, her expression unreadable. "I'll start with the most relevant to you. Effective immediately, all 6 executives who were present at your interview have been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation." My breath caught in my throat. "The independent inspector confirmed your assessment. All 7 valve systems require replacement. Work begins tonight." She slid a document across the desk. Unlike the confession I'd been forced to sign, this one bore the company letterhead and official seal. "This rescinds your previous statement and reinstates you to your position with full authority. Additionally, you're being appointed to lead a new safety oversight committee that will report directly to the board." I stared at the document, unable to fully process what was happening. "There's one more thing," the chairman continued, studying me carefully. "We need to understand how this happened. Not just the technical failure, but the systemic one. How 6 executives conspired to cover up a safety issue rather than address it properly." She leaned forward. "You've demonstrated integrity under extraordinary pressure, Miss Rivera. The board believes you're the right person to help us rebuild trust, both internally and with our stakeholders." "I don't understand," I managed to say. "Yesterday, I was being forced to sign a false confession. Today, I'm being promoted?" "Yesterday, a group of executives made a terrible decision based on financial expediency. Today, the board is making a different choice based on our long-term values." She handed me another document. "This is the preliminary report from digital forensics. Someone altered your original inspection documents, removing the test results you recorded." I skimmed the report. "You already knew." "We suspected," she corrected. "Your added sentence forced immediate action. By the time you walked into the boardroom this morning, we had confirmation that all 6 production lines shared the same vulnerability. What we didn't know, until your testimony, was who orchestrated the cover-up." As I left the chairman's office, clutching my reinstatement paperwork, my phone buzzed with a message from an unexpected source. "Valerie, the project director. Need to talk. Coffee shop across the street. Important." 20 minutes later, I slid into a booth across from Valerie. Her normally immaculate appearance was disheveled, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "I've been questioned by internal affairs for 4 hours," she said without preamble. "They're building a case against Penn and the executive team." "What did you tell them?" "The truth. That Penn pressured me to expedite the production line despite your safety concerns. That he later told me the additional tests you requested showed the valves were borderline but acceptable." She met my gaze directly. "I should have verified that with you directly." "I'm sorry," I nodded, processing this information. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because they're going to try to make you their scapegoat again." She lowered her voice. "The executives are claiming they were misled, that someone higher up demanded results, and they were just following orders." "Who?" "Ambrose Kingston." I felt a chill. Kingston was on the board, the company's largest individual shareholder and rumored to be the next chairman. If he was involved, they're saying it was Kingston who pushed for the production timeline, that he knew about the valve issues and demanded they be ignored. Valerie's eyes were intense. "Is that what you heard in any of your meetings?" I thought back carefully. "No, Kingston was never mentioned. But if he's implicated, then your victory might be short-lived," she finished. "The board stood up to the executive team, but will they stand up to one of their own?" That night, I received a text from Trish, the lead investigator. Check your email. Urgent. The message contained an audio file and a short note. Recorded during initial valve investigation. Thought you should have this. Be careful. I plugged in my headphones and pressed play. It was a conversation between the chief manufacturing officer and Penn, recorded in the background while Trish was examining the failed valve. Kingston can't be connected to this, the CMO was saying. If Rivera pushes back on taking the fall, we go with Plan B. Use her previous inspection reports against her. She documents everything meticulously, Penn replied. We'll have to alter the records. Then do it. Kingston wants this contained by Friday. The share price can't take another hit before the merger announcement. I played the recording 3 times, my hands shaking. This wasn't just about covering up a safety issue to save money. There was something bigger happening, a merger that apparently hinged on maintaining the company's stock value. The next morning, I arrived at work to find the company in chaos. News vans clustered outside the main entrance. Inside, security teams escorted employees from the executive floor, carrying boxes of documents and computers. My new office, part of my promotion, I was located on the same floor as the boardroom. As I approached, I noticed the chairman and 3 board members in intense conversation. They fell silent when they saw me. Miss Rivera, the chairman called. Join us, please. I entered the conference room, noticing the tension immediately. We've encountered some complications, the chairman began. Certain board members have raised concerns about the investigation's scope and your new appointment. Let me guess, I said. Ambrose Kingston? The chairman's eyebrows shot up. How did you know that? I placed my phone on the table. I have evidence suggesting Kingston was aware of the valve issues before the failure and directed the executive team to cover it up. Apparently, there's a merger announcement coming that he didn't want jeopardized. The room went utterly silent. One of the board members, a woman I recognized as the former head of a regulatory agency, spoke first. What evidence? I played the recording. When it finished, the chairman's face was pale. The merger vote is scheduled for tomorrow, she said quietly. Kingston has been pushing it through for months. This explains why he was so insistent on minimizing the production line issue. If this recording is authentic, said another board member, it changes everything. It's authentic? I confirmed. And there's more. The digital forensics team can trace who altered my inspection documents. I'm betting it leads back to Kingston, or someone acting on his direct orders. The chairman rose. We need to postpone the merger vote and expand the investigation immediately. Miss Rivera, I must ask you to surrender that recording to our legal team. Of course, I said, but I should mention that copies have been secured in multiple locations for my protection. She nodded, understanding the implication. Wise precaution. As the board members filed out to make calls and prepare for what would clearly be a contentious emergency meeting, the chairman lingered. You've started something significant, Miss Rivera. There will be resistance. Powerful resistance. I'm just doing my job, I replied, identifying safety risks before they cause harm. Her lips curved in a slight smile. Indeed, but now you're identifying risks to people whose annual bonuses exceed your lifetime earnings. That requires a different kind of courage. She was right. I'd stepped into a different arena, one where the stakes involved billions in merger deals and corporate power struggles far beyond my experience. My added sentence had pulled on a thread that was now unraveling something much larger than a faulty valve cover-up. By noon, Kingston had arrived with 3 attorneys. His entrance to the executive floor created a stir, employees peering from doorways as the tall, silver-haired man strode purposefully toward the boardroom, his face a mask of controlled fury. I stayed in my new office, reviewing documents the forensics team had recovered, including emails discussing the valve system. Some had been deleted, but were now restored. A pattern was emerging, one that confirmed Kingston had been briefed about the safety concerns months ago. At 2:15 p.m., my desk phone rang. It was the chairman's assistant. Your presence is requested in boardroom A, immediately. The assistant's tone made me pause. Who's making this request? Mr. Kingston and the special committee, she replied, her voice carefully neutral. Special committee, that was new. I grabbed my files and headed down the hallway, an uneasy feeling settling in my stomach. The boardroom was arranged differently now. Kingston sat at the head of the table, flanked by 2 attorneys. 3 board members I hadn't met before occupied one side. The chairman was notably absent. Miss Rivera, Kingston said, gesturing to an isolated chair facing the group. Thank you for joining us promptly. His smile never reached his eyes. As I took my seat, I noted the digital recorder placed conspicuously on the table. The special committee has been formed to review the events of the past week, Kingston explained smoothly. We have some questions about your actions and the creative addition to the document you signed. One of the attorneys slid a folder toward me. We'd like to begin by discussing your decision to falsify a company document by adding an unauthorized sentence. And just like that, I realized I was facing a second inquisition, one potentially more dangerous than the first. This time, Kingston was personally leading the charge. The trap was closing again, but this time, I wasn't walking in unprepared. Before we begin, I said, keeping my voice steady, I'd like to clarify something. Am I being questioned as an employee providing information to an internal committee? Or is this an adversarial proceeding where I should have my own legal representation? Kingston's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. This is merely a fact-finding discussion. In that case, I replied, opening my own folder, I have some facts I'd like to share with the committee. I placed a stack of documents on the table, copies of emails, inspection reports, and meeting minutes I'd compiled over the past 24 hours. On top, I placed a transcript of the audio recording Trish had provided. Perhaps we should start with these, I suggested. They provide important context for any discussion about document alterations. Kingston's eyes flicked to the transcript, then back to me. Something cold and calculating entered his expression, the look of a predator reassessing its prey. Where did you get these materials? He asked, his tone dangerously quiet. The same place I got this, I replied, sliding one final document across the table. It was a copy of an email Kingston himself had sent 6 months ago, specifically directing the executive team to handle the valve supplier issue quietly and ensure nothing delays the production timeline or affects Q3 numbers. The email had been deleted from the company servers but recovered by the forensics team just hours earlier. Kingston hadn't known it existed until this moment. His face drained of color. Before he could respond, the boardroom door opened. The chairman entered, accompanied by the company's general counsel and 2 people I didn't recognize. Mr. Kingston, the chairman said, this special committee meeting was not authorized by the full board. It ends now. Kingston rose, his composure slipping. You have no authority to... I have every authority, she interrupted, her voice like steel, especially given the SEC representatives who have just arrived to discuss some concerning information about potential securities fraud related to the pending merger. She gestured to the 2 strangers, who now produced identification badges. Miss Rivera, the chairman continued, thank you for your patience. You're free to go. We'll continue our official investigation through proper channels. As I gathered my documents, Kingston leaned toward me, his voice a harsh whisper. You have no idea what you've done, or who you're dealing with. I met his gaze. Actually, I do. That's why I added that sentence. The next 24 hours were a hurricane. Kingston was escorted from the building, but not before he made several calls from his private office. By evening, the company's stock had dropped 8% amid rumors of internal investigations. The merger was officially postponed in a terse press release that sent analysts scrambling. Security personnel were stationed outside my apartment building that night. The chairman's idea, not mine. Just a precaution, she'd said, but her expression suggested more concern than her words conveyed. Inside my apartment, I spread documents across my dining table, connecting threads between players and events. Kingston's influence extended far beyond what I'd initially realized. He sat on 3 other corporate boards, had political connections stretching to Washington, and controlled a network of investment vehicles that had positioned themselves perfectly to profit from the merger. My phone buzzed with a text from Valerie. Check your email. You need to see what's happening. The email contained a link to a business news site. The headline made my stomach clench. Safety inspector with history of mental health issues disrupts billion-dollar merger. The article quoted sources close to the company describing me as unstable and vindictive after being passed over for promotion. It mentioned a psychiatric leave I'd supposedly taken 3 years ago, a complete fabrication, and suggested I had personal vendettas against several executives. I reached for my phone with shaking hands and called the chairman. I've seen it, she said before I could speak. Legal is already demanding a retraction. It won't be the last attack. They're lying about me, I said, my voice cracking despite my efforts to remain composed. I never took psychiatric leave. I don't have a history of mental health issues. I know, she replied calmly. Your personnel file was pulled this afternoon. There's nothing in your record even suggesting these claims. This is Kingston's counterattack. Classic character assassination. What happens now? Now? Her tone hardened. Now we accelerate everything. The board has called an emergency session for tomorrow morning. The SEC has expanded their inquiry, and we need you to prepare for a deposition on Thursday. Sleep was impossible that night. By morning, 2 more articles had appeared, each more damaging than the last. One questioned my technical qualifications. Another implied I had personal relationships with board members who were protecting me. Kingston was fighting back with every resource at his disposal. When I arrived at headquarters, the mood was tense. Employees whispered as I passed. In the elevator, conversations stopped when the doors opened, resuming only after they closed again. The chairman met me at the executive floor entrance, her expression grave. Kingston's attorneys have filed for an emergency injunction, she said, walking me toward a conference room rather than the boardroom. They're claiming corporate espionage and breach of confidentiality. They're also requesting all evidence be sealed pending judicial review. Can they do that? They can try. But there's another problem. 3 board members have suddenly recused themselves from the investigation, citing conflicts of interest. All 3 have connections to Kingston's other business interests. The implications were clear. Kingston was marshaling his considerable influence to stall and possibly derail the investigation. The SEC investigators want to speak with you before the board meeting, she continued. They have questions about the timeline and the evidence chain. The SEC interview was exhaustive. The 2 agents, a woman named Melissa and a man introduced only as Barrett, showed neither sympathy nor hostility as they methodically walked through every document, every email, every conversation I could recall. When did you first become aware of Mr. Kingston's involvement? Melissa asked. 2 days ago, I answered truthfully, when Valerie mentioned his name. Yet you added that sentence to the confession document before knowing about Kingston, Barrett noted. Why? Because I knew the same valve systems were installed on the other production lines. If I was being blamed for negligent inspection of one, I wanted to ensure the others would be examined too. Melissa made a note. So, your primary concern was safety, not exposing executive misconduct? At that point, yes. I didn't know about the merger or Kingston's role. I just knew people could get hurt if the other valves failed. The questions continued for 3 hours. By the time they finished, the board meeting was already underway. The chairman texted, "Come now. Situation developing." When I entered the boardroom, the tension was palpable. Kingston wasn't present, but his influence was. The board members sat divided, physically and figuratively, with clear factions evident in their seating arrangements. "Miss Rivera," the chairman acknowledged me. "Please be seated. We were just discussing next steps in light of new developments." One of the board members, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses whom I recognized as Kingston's longtime ally, spoke up. "Given the serious nature of the counterclaims against Miss Rivera, we should consider placing her on administrative leave until all investigations are complete." Murmurs of both agreement and disagreement rippled through the room. "What counterclaims?" I asked, my voice somehow steady despite the knot in my stomach. The chairman hesitated before sliding a document across the table. It was a formal complaint filed that morning, alleging I had deliberately sabotaged the valve system to create a crisis that would derail the merger. "This is absurd," I said, scanning the allegations. "I can prove I was nowhere near the production floor when the valve failed. There's security footage, badge access records." "We know," the chairman interrupted, "but Kingston's legal team is demanding preservation of all evidence, including security footage, while simultaneously requesting a neutral third party to verify its authenticity. It's a delay tactic." Another board member leaned forward, the former regulatory head who had been present during my initial revelation about Kingston. "The real question is why," she said. "Why is Kingston fighting so hard? This goes beyond protecting his reputation or the merger. There's something else he's desperate to hide." The room fell silent as everyone considered this. What could be so damaging that Kingston would risk escalating a safety cover-up into a public legal battle? I thought back to the documents I'd reviewed, the connections I'd mapped on my dining table. Something nagged at me, a detail I'd seen but not fully processed. "The valve supplier," I said suddenly. "Who owns it?" The chairman frowned. "Techno Industrial Components. It's a subsidiary of..." She stopped, her eyes widening slightly as she made the connection. "Global Pinnacle Group," I finished for her, "which is primarily owned by Kingston Investments." The regulatory expert inhaled sharply. If Kingston pushed for those specific valves despite known safety issues, and he has a financial interest in the supplier, Then we're not just looking at a safety cover-up or securities fraud related to the merger, the chairman said. We're looking at self-dealing, procurement fraud, and potentially criminal negligence. The board meeting transformed into a war council. While Kingston's allies continued pushing for delays and administrative remedies, the majority faction, now galvanized by the new revelations, moved decisively. They authorized an expanded investigation, removed Kingston from all company positions pending its outcome, and approved full cooperation with regulatory authorities. As the meeting concluded, the chairman pulled me aside. Kingston won't go down without a fight, she warned. And he still has friends in powerful places. The next 48 hours are critical. She was right. By evening, the company's legal department had received 7 different legal notices from Kingston's attorneys. The SEC investigation was challenged on procedural grounds. The board's authority to remove Kingston was questioned through an emergency filing in Delaware court. Meanwhile, more damaging stories about me appeared in business publications and social media. An anonymous account posted what they claimed were my college transcripts, altered to show failed courses. Another suggested I had been terminated from a previous position for falsifying reports. The character assassination campaign was intensifying, but something else was happening too. Employees from across the company began reaching out, first individually, then in groups. Engineers I'd worked with, line supervisors, maintenance staff, all offering statements supporting my professional reputation and technical competence. The tide was turning. Thursday morning, I walked into headquarters to find the chairman waiting in the lobby, her expression unreadable. Kingston has requested a settlement conference, she said without preamble. His attorneys contacted us at midnight. My heart sank. He's trying to buy his way out of this. Possibly, but it might also mean he's realizing his position is weaker than he thought. She handed me a sealed envelope. This arrived for you this morning. Security screened it. It's safe to open. Inside was a single handwritten note on expensive stationery. This isn't over. Last chance to walk away intact. K. I showed it to the chairman, who sighed. Classic intimidation. We've seen worse this week. What happens at this settlement conference? Kingston, his attorneys, the special committee of the board, our general counsel, and the SEC representatives. They want you there too. When? 2 hours from now. I nodded, decision made. I'll be ready. The conference took place in a downtown law office, neutral territory. Kingston arrived with 4 attorneys and a financial advisor. He looked composed but tired, the strain of the past days evident in the shadows under his eyes. He barely glanced at me as everyone took their places around a massive conference table. His lead attorney, a woman whose suit probably cost more than my monthly salary, spoke first. We appreciate everyone agreeing to this discussion. Mr. Kingston believes there have been significant misunderstandings that have spiraled unnecessarily. He's prepared to offer a resolution that addresses all parties' concerns. The SEC representative, Melissa, responded coolly. We're listening, but I should note that the Commission's investigation will proceed regardless of any private settlement. Kingston's attorney nodded acknowledgement. Understood. Our proposal is straightforward. Mr. Kingston will divest his interests in both the company and techno-industrial components. He will step down from the board. In exchange, the company will issue a joint statement attributing the valve issue to a supply chain miscommunication with no intentional wrongdoing by any party. Our general counsel leaned forward. And the allegations against Miss Rivera will be withdrawn completely, with a public statement confirming her professional competence. The board's special committee members exchanged glances. From their expressions, I could tell they were considering it. A clean break, minimal public damage, quick resolution. And the other 6 production lines? I asked, breaking my silence. The ones with the same defective valves? Kingston himself answered, meeting my eyes for the first time. They'll be replaced, of course. Safety is paramount. Something in his tone, the practiced sincerity, the hint of condescension, ignited a slow burn of anger that had been building since that first confrontation in the executive conference room. I opened my portfolio and removed a single document, sliding it across the table toward Kingston. Then you won't mind signing this first. He frowned, glancing at the paper. What is this? A personal acknowledgement that you were aware of the valve safety concerns before the failure, that you directed executives to proceed despite those concerns, and that your ownership interest in the supplier represented an undisclosed conflict of interest. His face hardened. Absolutely not. That's not what we're discussing here. Actually, it is, I said calmly, because that sentence I added to the confession, it wasn't just about identifying the other defective valves. It was a trigger for something else entirely. The room went completely still. When I realized they were forcing me to sign a false confession, I knew I needed leverage, something that would activate automatically if they moved against me. So I added that sentence, knowing it would force them to either acknowledge the other defective valves or admit they'd coerced a false statement. I turned to the SEC representatives. But I also filed a whistleblower report that same night, detailing everything I knew then, everything I suspected, and linking it specifically to that sentence. The report included instructions to open a sealed evidence file if anything happened to me professionally or personally. Kingston's complexion had gone ashen. "You're bluffing." SEC case number WB78294, Melissa confirmed quietly, checking her notes. Filed electronically at 11:42 p.m. The night Miss Rivera signed the altered confession. The evidence file was opened yesterday morning following the publication of defamatory articles about Miss Rivera. I turned back to Kingston, whose carefully constructed facade was crumbling before our eyes. That sentence wasn't just a clever trap for the executives. It was insurance, a dead man's switch that guaranteed a full investigation no matter what happened next. Even if you'd succeeded in discrediting me or worse, the truth would still come out. Kingston's lead attorney placed a restraining hand on his arm as he started to rise. "You calculated everything," he said, his voice barely controlled. "From the beginning." "No," I corrected him. "I just did what safety inspectors are trained to do, identify failure points, and create redundant systems to prevent catastrophe. You threatened my career, my reputation, and potentially my safety. So, I built in safeguards." In the silence that followed, the chairman spoke. "I believe we're done here. There will be no settlement under these terms. The investigation continues, and the board will proceed with its fiduciary obligations." As we gathered our things to leave, Kingston remained seated, staring at the document I'd asked him to sign, the confession he'd refused to make. "You could have just done your job," I said quietly. "Replace the valves when the safety concerns were first raised. None of this had to happen." His eyes met mine, anger giving way to something like grudging respect. "You won." "No," I replied. "Safety protocols won. Transparency won. The system worked exactly as it was designed to." 3 weeks later, Kingston resigned from all his corporate positions and entered into a consent decree with the SEC. The company issued a public apology and commitment to a complete overhaul of its safety reporting systems. The merger was permanently canceled. As for me, I kept my new role heading the Safety Oversight Committee. The first policy I implemented was whistleblower protection with direct board reporting. The second was a requirement that all safety concerns receive written responses accessible to all employees. Sometimes in meetings, when executives grow impatient with safety protocols or suggest expedited timelines, someone will inevitably say, "Remember the valve sentence." And just like that, priorities realign. One carefully crafted sentence changed everything, not because of its legal implications, but because it forced a choice: acknowledge a dangerous truth or admit to coercion. Either way, the system that had failed would be forced to correct itself. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more about corporate accountability and justice. Have you ever stood your ground when pressured to compromise your values? Share your experience in the comments below. Remember, sometimes the most powerful tool isn't a grand gesture, but a carefully chosen sentence at exactly the right moment. Your voice matters more than you know.